This video is sponsored by Surfshark. Okay, yeah, this arc was the best. It's absolutely incredible. And not just that, this is easily the most tragic arc thus far that tackles some of the most intense subject matters, while focusing on an aspect of the story that has been at the forefront of it since the very beginning: its characters, and what effect they have on Luffy, building up to the most tragic crescendo, the likes of which affected me on such a profound level I had to take a step away from my desk and stare out a window for a few minutes. This arc made me laugh, it made me lean in, and it made me ugly cry more than any other part of One Piece has that I've read through. And so, without further ado, I'm Totally Not Mark, and these are my first impressions of, thoughts on, and review for a crazy little story that was so much fun and felt so much bigger than I thought it would. This is the beautiful, brutal, and bubbly Sabaody Archipelago. But before I dive into the subject matter for this week's review, however, I need to address a couple of things from my last video that I was perhaps unclear on or got flat out wrong, so let's explore them. A lot of people were claiming that Moria didn't relinquish the shadows to Luffy, that he eventually lost the Battle of Wills between Luffy beating him up and Lola's crew screaming and demanding for their shadows to return. This, coupled with the fact that he was crushed by a building, created the perfect storm of circumstance for his defeat and their shadows' ultimate reuniting. But what led me to my conclusions in the last video were the following. This panel taken from chapter 456, wherein Moria specifically says, and I quote, "That's right, no matter how defiant a person is, their shadows are obedient to me." This told me that willpower had nothing to do with it, but perhaps I read into that wrong. Moreover, this also led me to believe that by default the shadows were servants of him. He even demonstrates this by commanding Luffy's shadow in that very chapter, which would explain to me why the shadows were only with Luffy for a limited time and why they would be with Moria indefinitely, as it is part of his devil fruit power. Also, there's a specific manga panel in chapter 463 wherein Moria explains, and once again I quote, "Even if you beat me or kill me, the zombies simply lose their master. Their shadows stay where they are. My powers control the shadows. To get what you want, you'll have to make me tell the shadows to go back to their original owners, since I'm their current master." This therefore implies to me that even if Moria lost consciousness or his will, the shadows wouldn't return to their owners anyway. And to me, that sort of was the entire point of this particular dialogue exchange in the manga. And when I saw that it was contradicted at the very end, it sort of conflicted in my mind. So therefore, when I saw that Moria was losing consciousness and was about to be defeated, I was then surprised when the shadows went back to their owners. So I hope at the very least these two quotes being at the back of my head will inform you why I came to the conclusions that I did regarding the last video. Another comment that I saw claimed that I expect everything to be foreshadowed, and to that I say, I don't appreciate it when plot pivotal moments are dictated by coincidence. That's a preference I have and always have had. I have no issue with anyone liking what they like, but for me, if things happen for no reason that dictate the conclusions to stories, then what's the point of being told the information beforehand leading up to that ending, if it doesn't inform the events of that climax? In other words, I don't expect stuff like Moria's devil fruit abilities to be foreshadowed when he's revealing or explaining to us what they are and how they work in the beginning. That's exposition, and it's vital for a story. What I do mind, however, is when there are techniques revealed at the last hour without explanation that change the course of events. For instance, imagine if when Luffy returned the second time to face Crocodile armed with all that Yuba water. Imagine, if you will, Luffy returned from the desert, but we had no idea how he got the water. He just has it. That would feel weird and contrived and wouldn't make sense in the slightest. In another way, what if I said Luffy suddenly managed to become invincible and just beat him in one punch? That isn't foreshadowed, that isn't earned, and therefore it wouldn't make sense or be satisfying for a conclusion. And in a less extreme way than that, that's sort of how I saw the events unfold with the end of the Moria fight, as he introduced abilities that sort of came out of nowhere. And once again, I need to reiterate this, these are just my opinions, and if you loved what happened in the Moria arc, then I'm sincerely really happy that you exist and love it. I don't want people to dislike anything, I'm just letting you know how I felt about it. And really, I'm not holding One Piece here to some sort of special standard, I'm consistent with this across everything I watch. It just so happens that One Piece is great at not breaking these rules that I enjoy. Something of note, however, that others mentioned time and again in the comments was that Moria was unconscious, and just like Croc and Alabasta, that should be enough for him to relinquish control of the shadows and his subsequent devil fruit abilities, which honestly would have been totally fine. I just got caught up in the aforementioned quotes thinking that specifically stated that couldn't happen. But perhaps I misinterpreted that. Regardless, I'm getting a little lost in the weeds here, and I just wanted to make it clear as to why I held the opinions I did about Moria. After AJ sent me more and more comments from you guys, they demonstrated a lot of things I didn't pay attention to, like the thematic relevance and elements that Moria offers the story in its horror aesthetic. With that said, however, this review is about Sabaody Archipelago, and Moria will no doubt be back later, as he did survive in the last arc. So if I have more to talk about regarding him in the future, I'll be sure to mention it when he comes up. Now, onward to Archipelago Bubble Place. Alright, this arc was so good, I searched the dictionary for the most positive word in it I could find to describe how good I thought it was. The word I found was ineffable, which means too great or extreme to be expressed or described in words. Which it was. This arc was bloody ineffable in every sense of the word. I am first and foremost a massive fan of tragedy in storytelling, and boy, oh boy, this one got me. It got me good, tugging at my heartstrings more than any story I ever read, watched, or listened to. Heck, this made me cry more than some of the funerals I've been to in my life. And so, in order to tackle this properly, I want to discuss sections of it. Hopefully that way I'll tackle everything you all want me to, so yeah, let's begin. Duvall. Duvall gave me a great laugh and proved to be a fantastic way of introducing us to the world this arc explores and takes place within. As the gang arrive back at the Red Line, looking to cross it for the second time, only this time on the other side of the world, gotta love that sense of progression, it becomes abundantly clear that they need to cross specifically underwater. And that is when we meet this girl, Kami, a mermaid they saved from a sea monster. And she is specifically very important to the story in more ways than one, but none perhaps more important than the fact that she links us back with Hachi, the fishmen from Arlong Park, if you remember, that Oda took a lot of care and effort in exploring during the cover chapters portion of his storytelling, which all these cover chapters seem to carry so much importance and add so much to the overall narrative, it's nuts. Essentially, Kami requests of the guys involved to save her friend Hachi from this sinister-looking, helmet-wearing, monstrous entity known as Duvall. And once the Straw Hats eventually arrived to free Hachi from them, the atmosphere surrounding his unmasking was built up by Oda so perfectly to something menacing. To be perfectly honest, during this section I was full on expecting it to be someone like Don Krieg because of the armor. But man, was I wrong, and boy was the reveal so much better than I thought. I'm so glad that this wasn't paid off in any sort of serious way, and I love it all the more for it. It plays on an established joke regarding Sanji's wanted poster, with that specifically acting as the inspiration for the altercation in the first place. Climaxing with Luffy, Sanji, and the rest of the crew totally winning the scrap, rearranging Duvall's face into, surprisingly, a far more handsome one, all the while earning Hachi's freedom. All in all, this small self-contained little mini-arc was a really nice story that served to introduce us to Kami the mermaid, to reintroduce us to Hachi, to establish his motivations to help redeem himself in the eyes of Nami, and to provide us with a means of crossing the Red Line. And so, in order to help Hachi regain some semblance of conscience, he will bring them to a man in Sabaody Archipelago, wherein he will coat their ship in a substance that allows them to sail underwater through Fishman Island and under the Red Line into the New World. And while this seems straightforward and safe, nothing could be further from the truth. World building, Sabaody Archipelago. The world building in this arc works pretty much the exact same way as all the other arcs in One Piece. Absolutely brilliantly. A lot of people will disregard arcs like Thriller Bark and label them as something as simple as bad or poorly written because it's sandwiched between arcs like Enies Lobby and this. And while those arcs are phenomenal in their own right, I want to make it known that they work as well as they do because they were built up to by these smaller, lesser arcs. You can't have an Alabasta arc without Reverse Mountain, Little Garden, and Whisky Peak coming before it. You can't really have any climactic worth anything without prior build-up. In other words, you need calm moments in order to appreciate the action, and you need lower stakes in order to appreciate stuff like what's about to go down later. And don't worry, I will get to that. Within the archipelago the crew explore, Oda drop feeds us little pieces of information regarding its world via maps, modes of transportation, how its economy works, and of course, its culture. But this archipelago, more so than any other place in the One Piece world we've seen so far, has some of the darkest themes explored, like the selling of humans, public public executions, and slavery among other such activities. It's pretty surreal, and while I was reading it, I was really taken aback and pleased with the subject matter chosen to be explored here in order to bring this world to life. More so because of a certain promise Luffy made to Hachi not to interfere or cause destruction within a certain group. And it just so happens that certain group is... the friggin' worst. These nobles, referred to as celestial dragons by the regular people and themselves, are some of the most insufferable, deplorable, and sickeningly irredeemable characters I've ever come across yet in fiction, let alone One Piece. It's sort of like Oda said to himself, okay, let's think of the worst possible human traits and combine them into one character. Only he didn't do that, and he made a bunch of characters that are all equally awful. And they work so amazingly well to the catalyst of the horrific events that eventually unfold in the story thereafter. These people are revealed to be from a noble lineage. 800 years ago, 20 kings banded together to create the world government, and these celestial dragons are their descendants, unveiled in their opening scene executing a former pirate for trying to run away from them. Trying to run away from slavery, essentially. However, this primarily serves the purpose of informing us of how a certain system of human trafficking within the archipelago works and how slaves are made wear these collars that, if their owner so chooses, I want to thank Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video. In the ocean of online content, there's a lot of websites that take your info without you even knowing it, but you can swim under their radar using Surfshark VPN. With this particular service, you can stop websites from tracking your info and selling targeted ads to you online, completely protecting your privacy. Nothing is creepier than when you have a conversation with a friend about something and it pops up in your ads. Plus, with Surfshark Hardlock ID protection, you'll even get an alert when some rando jerk is trying to break into your email. But one of my personal favorite features of Surfshark is that you can see content that's not available in your area. For instance, did you know that right now on Netflix you can have the first 130 episodes of One Piece? Well, if you live in a country where that's not available, you can just log in with Surfshark and you can get access to that or any other show or film that isn't normally available for you. So, if you want both freedom and protection online, click the link in the description and use code TNM. It not only gives you a whopping 85% off the regular price, but also 3 months of service totally for free. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to even try it out for yourself. So if this service sounds interesting to you or you want to support the channel, please check it out. Now, back to the video.
My goal in life has more power than all of your blades.
Well, my blades are very heavy. They'll knock you for a loop. Then you can dream all you want.
Never try to be deep with a fish.
At a later time in this arc, there's this just great scene with Zoro. So, this celestial dragon guy arrives to the area, riding a slave, demanding medical personnel to stop helping the wounded and to instead bow before him as he passes. He then, in a classy fashion, demands one of the nurses to be his 13th wife, before subsequently banishing wives 1 through 5 because he's, quote, tired of them, and shoots her fiancé in front of her. And this is when I saw Zoro walk up to him. Once again, Oda using dramatic irony wherein we the readers know more than Zoro does in this particular situation, which honestly I adore because it creates anticipation and tension within a scene. We know that this celestial dragon guy has no idea how impossibly powerful Zoro is, and we also know that Zoro has no idea how important it is not to cause waves around these particular tyrants. So, needless to say, immediately and without warning, the tension in the scene shoots up from a 5 to a 10 as the celestial dragon shoots at Zoro, and with ease, Zoro dodges. But out of nowhere, one of the big bounties in the area pulls him to the side and plays off the encounter as if Zoro is dead to get them off his trail. She sort of reprimands him for his behavior and reminds him that this isn't the right thing to do, but Zoro sort of ignores this and takes the injured fiancé to get medical attention. In this scene, it's great to see that Zoro is a really good person, despite not necessarily touting himself as one. It's a great character moment, and what's more is that, once again, it gets over that these celestial dragon characters are the scum of the earth and don't deserve the air we all breathe, and certainly not the elitist bubbled air they breathe. They are certainly not powerful. And actually, speaking of powerful, that reminds me. As it happens, the archipelago the Straw Hats are currently searching around looking for this guy that can coat their ship with this awesome substance, also is a popular spot for those that made their journey across the Grand Line their own way before they move on to the New World. And as it happens, all of the other young pirates that made a name for themselves across the Grand Line through various different sailing routes are all on the archipelago too at the same time. Including Luffy and Zoro, there are 11 people in total having bounties higher than 100 million berries on the archipelago right now, and with one in particular having a higher bounty than even Luffy, which makes things all sorts of interesting. And within an entire chapter, Oda takes the time to introduce each of these fine upstanding criminals to us along with their bounty numbers. So I guess these will be mainstays in the series moving forward? The introduction of these new pirate characters, the presentation and scenes depicting the celestial dragons, and the boisterous enthusiasm Luffy tackles every subsequent situation with, serve to paint for me an intensely set of interesting parameters for the story already to operate within. But that is ignoring the single most important aspect of what made the story so tense and phenomenal for me. They are right next to the World Naval HQ. So if anything arises that needs to be addressed, they will most definitely come raining down on Luffy and his friends. So with all of these pieces in play, the story takes a turn into something interesting and awful, starting with Kami the Mermaid's kidnapping. I haven't touched on this much yet, but a key aspect that added a ton of tension in this arc for me was the underlying secrecy Hachi and Kami were forced to operate under. Apparently their kind isn't welcome in the archipelago, and moreover, mermaids, being notoriously difficult to catch as well as being incredibly rare, are one of the most sought after specimens during these human trafficking auctions, which on its own is incredibly disgusting and cruel. Needless to say, however, the crew all split up, even going as far as to use the help of their new allies in the Flying Fish Riders, and that's when they eventually all discover that Kami is being sold at an auction in the archipelago labeled number 1. And there we get to see the fiscal struggle for Kami's freedom, or enslavement, happen right before our eyes. And in traditional One Piece fashion, the most interesting part of it is revealed to be something we didn't even see coming, through a character we learn is called Rayleigh. More on him later. Nami, now armed with 200 million berries, all the money they have in the world from their adventures, she is ready to give it all up in order to save Kami. But before she even has a chance to place a bid, guess who comes through with an absurdly high bidding to outbid literally everyone?
Goku Beri Kaui!
Yeah, I know. And what's more is that during this scene we also get to see Law and Kid, two guys we were introduced to as part of the 11 bounties higher than 100 million present on the archipelago, with Kid being the one that has the highest bounty. Both of these characters' presence offer something interesting to the occasion in terms of personality, but they also sport some of the best sleek character designs I've seen come out of this series in a long time. I'm guessing they play a big role later, judging by their character designs, and I guess by later I mean right now, as when Luffy sees what this celestial dragon does at the auction, without delay and in perfect Luffy fashion, delivers one of the most satisfying punches I've ever in my life seen. I don't think I've ever wanted a character to be punched more than I wanted Luffy to punch this bratty moron celestial dragon character. And it's in this moment I realized how unbelievably thankful I was for how the Navy is represented in this story, because it's utterly brilliant for pacing. We all knew that when Luffy was told not to react to these celestial folks that he eventually would inevitably interact and start causing a big deal. Specifically because we have it at the back of our heads that we gotta remain composed and out of trouble to avoid the Navy. And funnily enough, thinking back to my thoughts at the beginning of this series, I was so scared that the Navy was going to be a Team Rocket type organization, because towards the start of the story they didn't really show their hand and what they were capable of. And the very fact that the Navy is a massively imposing force in these oceans of One Piece helps the story on so many levels in creating great, wonderful tension. This is where Oda starts to drive this story a little more dangerously, flirting with tension even more and driving the story in a way that makes me go, hey, Oda, you okay, buddy? So this pose off with these 3 heartthrobs of One Piece is cool and all, and we get a really cool action sequence where all of them work together. I also get the distinct feeling that as the series goes on, the significance of this moment will feel all the better as I reread or watch it when I'm finished. But perhaps the best sign that Luffy is growing as a captain comes from this scene too, where he opts to think of his friends first and run away to regroup for safety. After all, this isn't something that needs to be dealt with. They have Kami, they have everyone, all they have to do now is lay low and avoid everything, which is a nice piece of character growth and subtle foreshadowing for what's to come. But anyway, they eventually find this guy who will coat their ship, and man, this guy is a wild ride. Rayleigh. This guy is Goldie Roger's first mate. Holy Jesus on a bicycle. I was not prepared for him to say that, like, at all. And what's more is that one of the 10,000 theories I actually made way back when turned out to be true. Many videos ago, I made a prediction that there was no way Roger was captured without giving himself up or something to that effect. He was just too powerful. And wouldn't you know it, I nailed it! Apparently he got really sick, disbanded his group, and ultimately surrendered. Which, on its own, I'm sort of curious about, but I'm gonna wait and see how this arc itself plays out before I start speculating. When I read this, I literally stood up from my chair and held my hands high, triumphantly. Remember kids, if you want to predict something correctly, all you gotta do is throw thousands of speculations at the wall, and eventually, one will be gold amidst the sea of inconclusive and time travel speculation, which I'm deeply embarrassed about. During this section, there's an incredibly interesting conversation that takes place. Shanks is even brought up in conversation, and Luffy is told that he once worked for Goldie Roger as his apprentice, which honestly was really fun to read through, as we don't really get many chances for Luffy to actually talk or mention Shanks. What's more is that I often make note of these character breakdowns at the beginning of every volume, but one character that has literally always been there, regardless of whether or not he shows up in that volume, is Shanks. He's always there, and I think that's fitting as he is still sort of a driving influential force in Luffy's life, which on its own is a wonderful touch, I think. And finally, in this scene, there are 2 character interactions I really enjoyed. Firstly, as Rayleigh explains how Roger read the poneglyphs, Robin begins getting sucked more and more into this conversation. But when she learns how important it is for her to discover this on her own, she immediately stops probing for information, which is a nice little character moment for her. But that's not even the half of it. When Usopp asks this guy, Rayleigh, to tell him about where the One Piece might be or where he thinks it is, Luffy demanded not to know what he knows about the location of the One Piece treasure, which on its own is a really metal thing to say, but also perfectly in line and full of character for someone like Luffy to say. If anyone were to stumble in on you watching this episode or to pick up the manga at this particular chapter without any context, they would still get a fantastic idea of who Luffy really is based on this one decision. But moreover, during this arc, a few things caught my attention as worth keeping in mind to think about. It's let known to us that Ace is up for execution, which, I mean, if that happened would mean all-out war with Whitebeard and his forces. I guess this is perhaps what Shanks was trying to prevent when he met with Whitebeard earlier. And I think, if anything, this circumstance that Ace now finds himself in reinforces the notion that no one is truly safe in this world. When we first saw Ace, he was this calm, collected, fun-loving, incredibly impressive, and supremely powerful person, one that quite literally outshines Luffy in every way by his own admission, even as a child when he himself didn't have devil fruit powers. And so, now that he finds himself in the circumstance he's in, while I read this, I thought, man, I wonder what Luffy has in store for him if something like that can happen to Ace. And boy, was I not ready for what was to come next. And this is where Oda turns off cruise control and starts veering into oncoming traffic before continuing to drive erratically while I lose my ever-loving mind. Once this intensely interesting scene where Raleigh describes some info about Roger's past, the gang decides to lay low for 3 days while he works on coating their ship when... out of nowhere, standing before all 9 of the Straw Hats together, stands the single most formidable foe the gang has ever encountered. Kuma. And this is where things go from carefree to ludicrously intense in the blink of an eye. Showing no signs of slowing down or mercy, Kuma begins unloading massive attack after massive attack on each of the Straw Hats without reservation, requiring every single one of them to employ their own brand of heroism, strategy, and tenacity to create the perfect storm of offense to take out this once thought to be invincible foe. And trust me, this is not an easy effort. This takes every last bit of energy these guys can muster, utilizing all of their best techniques, all of their power in one short burst of combined, coordinated assault. This scene, more than any other, demonstrates the crew at their absolute best, all on the same page, all in the same circumstance, helping each other and overcoming in their own way a massive threat. I do not want to undersell how immense this particular occasion feels. However, once this giant enemy does hit the floor, it becomes immediately apparent that everyone is spent. They have no energy left, and that's when... Things have now gone from a bad situation to a dire one, as we now know that the only option the crew have is to run away, which, as it turns out, isn't a good one. All this time, Luffy has been screaming the order for them to try and escape, and as his friends get taken away from him, one after the other, he starts taking more and more desperate attempts to save them. But as the last one vanishes right from before his eyes, he falls to his knees weeping. This tiny section of this small scene got me more than any other chapter or scene in the entire series so far. Watching this character, who is described quite literally in the front of every volume as someone with boundless optimism, to see this poor character crushed by loss and circumstance before being erased too, broke me in a way I wasn't even remotely prepared for. This arc forces you to cope and accept the situation's worsening atmosphere in a natural but uncomfortably fast way that places you, or at least tries to place you, in the same frantic, desperate feeling the character feels. And this is achieved not just in the escalating action and violence, but in the literal plot being erased from right before our eyes. Every single character in this Straw Hat crew has had their own individual story in this series. Zoro and Luffy in Romance Dawn, Nami in Orange Town, Usopp in Syrup Village, Sanji in Baratie, Chopper in Drum Island, Robin in Alabasta, Frankie in Water 7, and Brook in Thriller Bark. Remove these characters and it quite literally sucks the character and purpose out of this world. We've known these characters for the exact same amount of time as Luffy. We have the same connection to them as he does, which puts us in a unique position wherein we as readers can judge Luffy's orders and read into them what they might mean to him and us. I care about all of them, and the truly terrifying aspect and part of this entire scene was, I don't think I would have made a single different decision than what Luffy did. Which just reinforces this sense of desperation we feel as readers so palpably when Robin finally vanishes before Luffy's eyes. And so, like Luffy, my heart sank and I felt a severe pit in the middle of my stomach, like I had just received real-life bad news. No other story ever in my life invoked such a real, raw, guttural response from me, and I ugly cried on this page. Like, I stayed on this page for probably 10 minutes before turning it to finish the chapter. And even as I write this, my heart is still racing with my hands slightly shaking. This scene affected me in such a profoundly different way than I was ever expecting it to. So much so, I had to start writing my thoughts right away. This part here that you're hearing me speak right now, this is the part of the script I've actually written down first. I have so many thoughts I don't even know how to process them. For obvious reasons, I know that this most definitely can't be the end of Luffy's journey with the rest of them, and that this Kuma ability surely just teleports them elsewhere or something to that effect. But that doesn't matter because for me, the implication is one and the same in this scene. Luffy's single greatest fear has been realized. He wasn't able to save any of them from the dangers of the Grand Line. All of them had to go away. And he was powerless to do anything about it. Thematically, narratively, and even emotionally, this hit perfectly, encompassing literally the central through line of the entire series, the ragtag camaraderie that comes with the friends we've met along the way. And what's interesting about this scene also is that it comes right after Luffy demanded not to know more than he needed to know about Goldie Roger and his past regarding the One Piece treasure, because he wants it to stay fun. Luffy doesn't want power. He doesn't want to rule over anyone. He doesn't even really want the treasure beyond saying that he himself found it. The journey that he's on to that ultimate dream of his is the reward. That's Luffy's treasure. His friends. The journey, the adventure, the excitement, that's what he's there for. And right before his eyes, right before our eyes, without having any power to manipulate or control the dire situation, one after another, the loyal, loving, brave souls that pledged their lives to Luffy throughout this series and all together just one arc prior, they were all taken away from him as he was forced to watch it all unfold. Luffy was forced to watch himself once again become alone and lose all of his friends. What an absurdly effective scene, and what a beautifully constructed arc. And that's what this is. This was a gorgeous arc in how elegant and light it was, while being able to deliver such an intensely passionate gut punch that hit its mark right in my stomach. What this arc does better than any of the others, in my opinion, is naturally escalate tension more efficiently in a shorter span of time than pretty much any of the other arcs, climaxing in one of the most anxious, nerve-wracking struggles I've seen from this series ever. And trust me, I'm using the word struggle in this instance with great purpose and utility. This wasn't a fight, this was a statement, and Luffy, I think, received that message loud and clear. Like, to put this into perspective, right? This arc was so intensely good and affected me on such a cellular level that I, for the first time ever, had to tweet out my thoughts on it before I released this video. Heck, before I even finished the script, I tweeted that out. My God, holy hell, this arc was stupidly good. Introducing new characters that reveal so much about the past, a confirmation on a hunch I had from videos ago that Gold Roger had to have handed himself in over to the Navy because he would have been too powerful, receiving breadcrumbs of information about the world's government that forced me to put my thinking cap on more than I was comfortable with in this video, but easily at the forefront of my brain, I have the characters and friends that I've become deeply attached to over the last 2.5 months and 500 chapters. They are after vanishing, and I don't know where to. But all I do know is that I will be covering it next week. And when I do, I hope you'll be there to join me. As always, I've been Totally Not Mark. I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for watching.